This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, May 21st. Supervisors, please rise for your honoring of the flag and a moment of reflection by Supervisor Bates. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Since shortly after the Civil War in 1868, we have used the last Monday in May as a moment of reflection to honor the individuals who died in service to our country. It was clear that that particular element for me became very real during a trip to France on the anniversary of D-Day. We happened to be in Normandy because Jean-Paul's mother and father live in a little community there, and so we took the time to take a look at what happened there historically in 1944. As we walked along the beach in the sand, we soon came to a very precipitous cliff, very jagged and rugged. And Jean-Paul said, "This is Omaha Beach. This is where the American forces came, along with people from many countries, to change the direction of the war." We took time not only to look at that beach, but to go up to the area that had been part of a huge line of defense that started up near the Netherlands and went all the way to the Spanish border, with concrete bunkers that overlooked that beach. We went down into the bunkers, and there were slots where they could put guns through, machine guns, to cover the area below. It was literally like a shooting range. As we were there, I couldn't help but think to myself that they hadn't changed the landscape. There were still bomb craters around that area, reminding us of the devastation that occurred. Our forces were part of 2 million men who really were a part of that long effort. Later that afternoon, we went to what is known as the Normandy American Cemetery. There we found 10,000 American, I'll say boys, because many of them were extremely young. It was immaculate, beautifully kept. As I came into it, I almost felt like I was in a sacred place. I looked, well, this is like the United States. There were Polish names, there were Norwegian names, there were English names, but they were all Americans. Later that afternoon, we stopped to see Jean-Paul's uncle, who knew we were coming. He was a teacher of history in a local high school. He said, "I want to show you something that he had presented to his class." It was composed of newsreels from a lot of different entities. In the process of showing them, he paused as it came to a young American coming up the beachhead, his gun, his rifle above his hands here, and the water lapping at the front of him. He paused at that spot, and below it he had written, "Look carefully at this face. You owe him your freedom." And we still do. We still need to take the time to reflect on the number of lives lost in order that this land has literally been free for a very long time. So I'd like to ask you to just take a very quick moment of silence, that we might think about those in our families who made the ultimate sacrifice in order that we could be free. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bates. Tonight's meeting will be broadcast on Valley Media Works, Charter Channel 994 on Thursday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. following the meeting, WFRP LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and indicate your presence.
Supervisor Bates, can you just?
I'm here.
We'll take that. We'll take your word for that, Supervisor. We have 24 present. We have quorum. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is approval of the Journal of Proceedings of May the 7th. Motion? Motion by Supervisor Miller, second by Supervisor McKinney. Any changes, deletions, corrections? I see none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public comment. We have two members of the public here to offer comment. First, I'll call Lance Basting to come up and ask Jeremy Graggart to remain over here ready to speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Lance Basing. I live at 6137 Andrew Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I'm here to speak on the revision of the county impound ordinance coming in front of the board tonight. Through a bizarre set of circumstances, my car was towed on March 13th, 2019 by the order of the County Sheriff's Department. I was charged $359.03 to get my car back from Chad's Towing. These fees covered towing and impound fees. I teach at Chippewa Valley Technical College, and for many of my students, they would not have been able to pay up that money right away. Their cars would have been impounded for probably several days. They would have missed classes, probably missed work, and would have had a hard time getting their kids to school. So with this in mind, I started to look at the county impound or the county ordinances relative to towing and impound. And the ordinance states that my car should have actually been taken to the county impound lot in Altoona. Instead, it was taken to Chad's Towing. And the ordinance also sets the charge for the impound fee at $30 a day, which is to be paid to the county. I never paid any money to the county. I paid my money instead to Chad's Towing, who charged me $45 a day. And then as an aside, I called Adams Towing, who also tows for the county, and they charge $50 a day for their impound fees. I'm sure there's a wide array of costs and fees that are charged by the different companies that tow for the county. My experience is not uncommon. I've done some research, and from what I can tell, roughly 450 cars were towed by the county in the one-year period, April 2018 to April 2019. So this is not a small problem. So we've got some issues. The people who are towed by the order of the county are not being treated equally. In fact, are being taken advantage of by private towing companies charging a wide range of inflated impound fees over and above those clearly stated in the county ordinance. There's an associated issue too, and that has to do with the exorbitant fees the towing companies are charging for actually the towing part, at least when it's ordered by the county, because there's no recourse for these people. When I called Chad's Towing and asked how much it would cost me as a private citizen to have my car towed 8.2 miles, the distance mine was towed, they told me it would cost about $100 if I paid cash. When I called Adams Towing with the same scenario for a comparison, I was quoted a price of $73.25. Chad's Towing charged me $245 when the sheriff called and had my car towed. And they're getting away with this because there's simply no oversight on the system. As the system currently operates, the county is in an implicit contract with these towing companies. There are no written rules governing the contract, and so the towing companies are free to charge as much as they want to when they're dealing with private citizens who have been towed on the order of the county. If the private citizen would call on their own, the towing companies would charge much less, as I just stated. So tonight I'm here to ask that you postpone passing the revision and simply postpone it. I'm not suggesting to not pass it, but to postpone it. And until the administrative committee and the full board has more information about what's happening in regards to the county towing and impound process. I would also ask you to institute a sealed bid system so the county can contract explicitly with towing companies, not implicitly, to get a handle on the oversight. And if the county insists on using the towing association or these towing companies that they've been using, I would suggest that the county establish the parameters and requirements of a contract to set the rate for impound and towing. Again, if the county is doing the towing, the county ought to regulate the towing, not the individual companies. Regardless of the option you pursue, I urge you to adopt a towing bill of rights, which clearly explains the fees and processes to anyone who has their vehicle towed by the order of the county. These are used in these ideas are used in larger cities. This towing bill of rights should be widely disseminated, and towing companies should be required to provide them to the owners of vehicles who have been towed. I'm asking you to provide oversight in this issue so that you can, as your mission statement reads, safeguard and enhance the well-being of residents in Eau Claire County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to speak is Jeremy Greggert.
All right, good evening. Jeremy Greggert at 451 Lincoln Avenue here in the city of Eau Claire. Coming to speak in favor of the Eau Claire County Bike and Pedestrian Plan that's in front of you today. I think it's a great next step after the work that was done to pass a 100% renewable energy goal and carbon neutrality goal for this county by the year 2050. It's going to take a while to transform our infrastructure and figure out how to target those investments that we need to make. As many of you know, I serve on the city council, but I'm here just speaking personally tonight and served as a citizen on the advisory committee for this plan. I want to thank the county staff and the West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission and the citizens that volunteered to work on the plan. I think it'll be a good tool for us as we're updating and continuing to advance bicycling in the county. I was involved in the Chippewa Valley Bike Map project, which was completed in 2015, and we're going to do an update of that soon. And then the county has been a partner on the Chippewa Valley Bike Route System, which the Regional Planning Commission has also been involved with. I'm a board member with the Chippewa Valley Transit Alliance and used to work for Wisconsin Bicycle Federation, so I've been involved with this a long time and really happy to see that this was done in collaboration with neighboring counties so we can make sure the connections are made in that regard. So Chippewa County and Dunn County were part of the same project, but St. Croix County was done a few years ago. A lot of the connectivity issues that we see are, particularly with the county, are when you have the city and county lined parts of the community where you have a transition of State Street out of town where suddenly there are no sidewalks, for example, or on McKinley Road in the town of Seymour. So I think this plan really gets us to think about how the city and county can work together on addressing some of those issues. Wider shoulders are a big part of it, and figuring out where we can put more trails are a big part of it. I know that on Highway 93, for example, that's an area we need to study more in terms of how we can accommodate a bike route on that area. And it's important, of course, that it's a bike and pedestrian plan, but it's also important that it's a plan for recreation as well as for transportation. And I live in Eau Claire without a car, so I sometimes need to travel to other cities, and Menominee is about 2 to 3 hours away by bicycle, but I'm primarily on county roads because they're the lowest traffic, and town roads are sometimes work, but they're often not as well connected across county lines and things like that. I serve on the city's plan commission as well, so I understand the importance of plans, and we did a bike and pedestrian plan in 2010, and then we updated it just this last December in 2018. So just really happy to have this in front of you. And the big thing to note, I think, is that having a plan like this, which was funded primarily with a grant, it'll leverage a lot of extra funds from grants to be able to do a lot of improvements on the county roads. So it really kind of saves money in the long run because it helps you target your funding and get access to new funding. So just wanted to show my support.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there any other member of the public who wishes to make comment? Okay, we are at the close of the public comment period. The next item on our agenda is reports to the county board under 2.04.320, beginning with oral reports. So I call forward Josie Liberty, who will present the scholarship awards.
Good evening. As co-chair of the Scholarship Committee, it's my pleasure to be here tonight to present the 2019-2020 Scholarship Awards to 9 recipients. 2019 marks the Scholarship Fund's 28th year. The Scholarship Committee is made up of 20 regular and events-only employee members who raise funds year-round by hosting a variety of events. Including tonight's awards, the Eau Claire County Employee Scholarship Fund has presented 265 scholarships totaling $161,100. The overall number of scholarships awarded varies from year to year depending on the total number of eligible applicants and the amount of available funding. And this year we had an impressive 24 applicants. Scholarship recipients are determined by an independent review committee not affiliated with Eau Claire County, and the applicants are evaluated based upon a combination of their academic performance, school and community activities, their work experience, leadership, career aspiration or goals, and 2 letters of reference. Applicants must maintain a minimum of a 3.0 GPA to qualify and must be the child of a permanent employee with at least 1 year of dedicated service to Eau Claire County. Tonight, we are pleased to present scholarships for the 2019-2020 academic year in the amount of $700 to 9 worthy students. I would like to thank the award recipients and their families who were able to attend this evening, as well as the department heads who have agreed to present, and also to the county board for allowing us this opportunity to publicly recognize these fine young students and their families. With that, I will present the first award. Highway Commissioner John Johnson could not be with us this evening, so I would like to invite Jamie Peterson and her family to step forward if they are present. Guess not. So a little bit about Jamie. Jamie Peterson is the daughter of Kelvin Peterson, who is employed as a heavy equipment operator for the county's highway department. Jamie was Fall Creek's valedictorian in 2018, and she's currently a freshman at UWEC, where she serves as program coordinator for the Towers Hall Council and serves on the RA Selection Committee. She's also a member of the Blue Gold Marching Band, and she's made the Dean's List. Jamie is the Vacation Bible School Director at her church, collects donations for Bolton Refuge, and is mentoring a high school student at North. Throughout this past year, Jamie has decided to shift her focus from education to wanting to earn her PhD in psychology to focus on the treatment of mental health. I would like to congratulate Jamie for being selected as a 2019-2020 Scholarship Award recipient, and I will accept her award on her behalf. Next up, I would invite Dave Hayden to the podium, please.
This is Annika Chestnut. She is the daughter of Wendy Chestnut, who is...
Why don't you come forward?
The pictures are much better up here. But Wendy's a systems analyst project manager in the information systems department. Annika is currently a senior at Memorial High School, an excellent student maintaining a high grade point average while taking quite a number of advanced placement courses. She's active in several clubs, organizations, and athletics, in FFA, the Key Club, Friends Not Food Club, and the Chess Club. She's also involved in the community through employment and volunteer activities, working at the Westgate Animal Hospital and for the Eau Claire Express, and volunteering at Vacation Bible School and the Eau Claire Humane Association. Annika plans to attend Northern Michigan University in their pre-med program with a goal of being a surgeon in the future. So join me in congratulating her and wishing her well in the next step in her academic career.
Sheriff Kramer could not be with us this evening, so I will invite to the podium Captain Joel Brennigan and Reed Strasberg and his parents.
Thank you. This is Reed Strasberg and his parents, Chad and Sherry Strasberg. Chad has been with our department for 17 years. He's currently a patrol deputy, moving into court services happily on Monday, I believe, correct? Yes. 24 hours. 24 work hours. Yes, correct. That's true. Reed grew up in the Fall Creek area and has just finished his freshman year at the Montana Bible College in Bozeman, Montana. I know we're all jealous of the hunting out there, but he's doing more serious things than hunting. His goal is to become a pastor to assist the physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being of others in serving his community while doing so. He's a member of the College Activity Leadership Group, whose mission is to plan, organize, and execute community building activities. He was a member of the Bible College Choir and a group called Cross Life, which does Bible studies and small group meetings to foster social and spiritual relationships and understanding. One of his professors is quoted as saying about Reed as a man of integrity that can be trusted. He is hardworking and disciplined in whatever task he puts his hand to do, and he has an intentional outlook in wanting to make an impact on the lives of others. The dean of its students at Montana Bible College describe observing Reed's character from the perspective of a teacher, dean of students, housing director, and fellow church member. In all these scenarios, Reed has proven himself to be exemplary. He also describes work as meeting standards they usually expect from seniors. It is clear Reed is a person of high character and has an enormous care for his community and those who live in it. I am honored to present the scholarship award to very deserving Reed.
District Attorney Gary King and Alex Brayton, and well, she's not here, but her parents are here. So.
Good evening. First, I want to say congratulations to all of the award recipients. Such a positive experience to listen to all the stories of these kids, and gives us a lot of hope for our future, doesn't it? But tonight I'm here to present a scholarship award to Alex Brayton here on her behalf of her parents, Angie and Troy. As many of you know, Angie is our diversion coordinator, or as I like to often say, the best diversion coordinator in the country, if not on the planet. She does a great job for us, and getting to know both herself and Troy over the years, it's not a shock that Alex is a recipient of one of these awards. Alex is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She just completed another year there, cumulative GPA of 3.5. In addition to her school schedule, she works as a legislative intern for Senator Bernier. She also has a second job at a cafe. In addition to her employment and schooling, she volunteers at the Family Court Clinic at the law school, and that clinic assists low-income individuals in finding legal representation. She also has shadowed Circuit Court Judge John Menedides here in the county throughout her time in college. Those of you that are on Judiciary and Law may remember that she was a part of that committee as a high school student. My favorite part of her application is that she wants to go to law school when she's done with her degree. And I say that's my favorite part of her application, not because she wants to go to law school, but for the reason that she lists in her application, which is to help people in ways others cannot. And so we look forward to her pursuing that degree after her undergraduate degree. In terms of her reference letters, she's described as a highly motivated individual, engaged and thoughtful, an excellent interpersonal skills, an extremely bright future, and finally someone who has compassion, intelligence, and common sense. So I'm very pleased to present a scholarship award to Alex Braden.
And our last presenter this evening is Department of Human Services Director Diane Cable. She has 5 awards to present tonight. So I will introduce or invite Sophia Zier and her family to step forward, and Diane can take it from there.
Good evening, everyone. I just would like to echo what District Attorney Gary King says, is that it's, and I'm sure all the presenters felt, it's really quite amazing to read these applications and have these young people come forward. Pretty amazing young people. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Sophia Zier. Her mom is Lissa Zier. Her mom is an employee at Human Services and works in our fiscal area. And tonight she's here with her grandparents, Ken and Lynn, who are very proud of her, if you can't tell. So Sophia is a senior at Memorial High School this year and is graduating in what she has told me, 6 days she's done. Regardless of whatever snow days are tacked on, she's done. And she is interested in pursuing a double major in environmental studies and German. She grew up learning the importance of sustainability from her mom and stepdad, who started a local food co-op and who practice and probably in all their decision-making, environmentally wise decisions. Sophia had the opportunity in high school to spend time in Germany, and besides loving the language and culture, she noticed the focus on sustainability. Sophia noticed that everyone in Germany used public transportation and that trains and buses were a way of life, or are a way of life. And so doubling in a major in German and environmental science seemed to be a path that matched her well. Sophia is noted in her application as a bright student, a National Honor Student, and has always been involved in community service and volunteering. Sophia is described as dedicated, intelligent, motivated, and who is willing to challenge herself from advanced classes, volunteer work, and earning 3 varsity letters. She is known as having a positive outlook on life, as infectious, and her caring nature toward family and others as being very inspirational to all she is encountered with. And so with that, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate you, Sophia, and we wish you well in all your endeavors.
Thank you.
And she's decided to go to the University of Wisconsin-Madison in pursuing her degree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I just enter? Okay, all right, we'll keep going. And next, I'd like to invite Egan and his dad to come forward, Egan Hill and Aaron Gregory. Hi. So Egan Hill is here along with his dad, Aaron Gregory. Aaron works for the Department of Human Services, is working as a juvenile intake social worker, working with many of our youth and previously in the Children's Court Services in the same area, and has done that well for a long time. Egan learned early in his life the importance and value of education from his mom He described in his application as dad. He's described as an very eager to learn, and his enthusiasm for classroom participation was unmatched. Egan described himself as always envisioning himself to go to college, and his will is to be attending the University of Eau Claire this fall. So while in high school, Egan found his passion in music and theater, and noted his experiences helped to shape him into the person he has become by gaining self-confidence, leadership, and skills, and the importance of teamwork. In other words, he had to learn how to work with a lot of people who had a lot of talent, right? Teachers recognize Egan's strength of being able to work with all different type of people. He understands the importance of hard work, honesty, and understanding the importance of teamwork. Egan has top academic achievements, civic-minded, and thought well of by peers and school staff, and eager to volunteer his time and energy to his community and his country. Egan was president of the school's Flags for the Fall. Did I say that right?
Flags
For the Fallen. Sorry, can't read my writing. Flags for the Fallen program. And this is a program that's designed for students to honor the sacrifice of the school's deceased military heroes. Thank you. So congratulations, Egan, for all of your work and for this honor, and to you and your family. It is with pleasure that we award you this scholarship, and we wish you well in your studies and your endeavors here at Eau Claire. And the Laura Sokup, and I am not certain if she's here this evening. It does not look like it. Laura is the child of Mike Sokup, who is one of our staff people. He is a social worker here at Human Services. And Laura makes her plans to pursue education, and she will be studying at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire also. And she really found her passion by a math teacher who helped her to find confidence, and that she really wanted to be able to work with children in and will be pursuing an elementary education degree here at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And so we will certainly pass on your congratulations to her. Kaylee Brown, who is the daughter of Julie Brown, also a social worker at Human Services. Kaylee is currently a student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and she is pursuing a nursing degree with her goal to become a nurse practitioner. And so she's pursuing her nursing degree and then her master's degree, and then hopefully to become a nurse practitioner. And she's working really hard to be able to do that. She's recognized also as an excellent student, and someone who is very caring to all those that she works with. And again, we'll pass on to her congratulations from you for that scholarship. And lastly, we have, Waletsky, thank you. I always say the last name wrong, so thank you very much. Kyle Waletsky, he's a junior student at the University of Minnesota Duluth. He is studying he's in the integrated elementary education, special education program there, and is very passionate about working with children and working with helping them to be able to feel successful. And so once again, he's a junior there, and we will pass on congratulations to him also for receiving that scholarship. Thank you very much. And thank you, Josie. Yes, will you distribute those? I will do that. Okay.
So that concludes our 2019-2020 Scholarship Awards presentation. My understanding is that you are all welcome to stay for the remainder of the board meeting. But assuming the students and their families would like to leave, I would ask that you meet me out in the hallway, and I'd like to take a group picture. So again, thank you, board members, for allowing us to present this evening.
Thank you, Josie. The next item on our agenda is presentation on the bicycle and pedestrian plan. Rod Esslinger and Matt Michaels.
Good evening. My name's Rod Esslinger. With me this evening is Matt Michaels, Senior Planner for Eau Claire County, Ann Schell from the Regional Planning Commission. Oh, let me use the microphone. Yep, okay. Ann Schell with the Regional Planning Commission is also with me, joining us. We have a short presentation this evening, and this is in regards to the bike and pedestrian plan that's on for consideration, specifically file number 1819-111. We're all going to have a brief report. We have a PowerPoint, which I believe everybody has received. Samantha should have sent that out last Thursday. So you can follow along on your iPads. We'll essentially cover the same thing with the PowerPoint here. Just a little bit of background, history of how we got here to tonight. In 2016, this very body, the county board, approved an application by resolution for a Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP grant. This was a grant that was from the Department of Transportation. And the purpose of this grant was to develop a bike and pedestrian plan for Eau Claire County. That was the first step in this effort. As we progressed, funding was secured. 2017, in cooperation with Eau Claire County, obviously us, Chippewa and Dunn County, we received the funding. And you can see on the screen, the project was worth $160,000. It was 80% match from the state, and the local share was $32,000, with Eau Claire County taking the lead on the grant, and our share was $12,000. The next couple years, 2017, 2018, the efforts commenced, and basically at the direction of Ann, Regional Planning Commission worked with county staff. Matt Michaels was the chair of the committee, and other stakeholders. You heard from one individual that was a citizen member, Jeremy, this evening, to develop the plan. You'll see in the PowerPoint, the events that led up to it, the public informational meetings that were held, and then just the public outreach that was that went into the particular plan. This particular matter, the bike and pedestrian plan, was presented to the Planning and Development Committee on February 26th, and it was approved with a unanimous vote. It came in front of this body on March 5th, and in a motion, and it was seconded for approval. At that time, the Supervisor Gibson did refer the matter to the Highway Committee. On March 21st, myself, Ann, and Matt presented at the Highway Committee and had a discussion. The Highway Committee at that time, on a vote 2-3, did not support the plan at that time. So that kind of brings us up to tonight. The matter is in front of you. It's file number 1819-111. You have that information that will be considered a little bit later this evening. The rest of the presentation, Matt and Ann will give you some further background on the public participation and also the purpose, and a little bit about how we got here with the actual plan.
Thank you, Rod. Can everybody hear me okay? That's one of my things here. I do apologize. It looks like for some reason it's cutting off the right side of my slide, but hopefully you guys can follow along, and I will go fairly quickly here. So the purposes of the plan primarily are to establish a network of bikeways connecting communities and places of interest throughout the county, and also with a kind of ancillary benefit of increasing safety, both for motorists as well as bicycles and pedestrians, and longevity and durability of the roadway network. The plan is composed to be actionable and fiscally responsible implementation to allow the county to leverage the grant dollars. Mr. Greger kind of touched upon that. The plan is intended to integrate with the existing county's CIP, capital improvement plan, in the highway planning and funding process. That's meant to work in tandem with that. Now, a key point, and I repeat it a couple times here, is that the plan does not in and of itself obligate the county to expend funds. Rather, we look at it as a tool that can be used at the county's own will and discretion to leverage, in some cases, up to 80% matching funds. And this is, quote, from the ordinance as funding and resources allow. And I think we're all very aware of some, concerns and priorities that the county has to grapple with when we talk about funding. I added this just to kind of give us some context as well. Why is the planner working with the RPC? We talked a little bit about the county's, I guess, backing of the resolution to give us direction to apply for the TAP grant, which we did receive. Looking at our county comprehensive plan, and honestly, it's sometimes easy, I think, to forget what the policies are. But Transportation Goal 1 says that we should provide for a safe, efficient, multimodal, well-maintained transportation network for all residents, farmers, commercial, and emergency vehicles. The following policy says when county roads are reconstructed or resurfaced, incorporate striped shoulders safe for bicycling in areas planned for such facilities. And policy 1C says the county will work to leverage state and federal funds to implement components of and it says the Chippewa-Eau Claire Metropolitan MPO long-range plan. That was the plan. This plan was adopted in 2010, so this would be a subsequent regional plan. Eau Claire Healthy Communities, Chronic Disease Prevention Action Team, and one of the things we look at is health benefits associated with outdoor recreation. Goal 2 says increase physical activity in Eau Claire County for Eau Claire County residents through education, outreach, collaboration, and policy. Audrey Berner from the Health Department was a member of the committee and sees, I guess, the nexus between this effort and some of their efforts. Eau Claire County is a charter member of the Green Tier Legacy Communities. They talk about transportation demand management strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. One of their goals is to prepare a plan identifying disconnects in the bike and pedestrian networks, prioritizing establishment of new connections, and identifying potential funding sources for the most important projects. And then finally, Mr. Greger alluded to this as well. On April 16th, the board adopted a resolution establishing goals of 100% renewable energy. Looking at the work plan, item number 2, areas of energy control. Item 1I, county government should develop transportation alternatives. And then going down to Roman numeral 3, program incorporation. Number 1, search out and apply for grants to assist with implementation. So the bicycle network plan, this is like kind of what the guts of the plan is. It's a bicycle network plan proposed for primarily on-road bicycle facilities and off-road pedestrian bicycle trails. And I'll get into the kind of details here in a moment. The plan identifies gaps in the system, connects to a regional network, which I think is not maybe unique, but a really cool feature that the RPC worked previously with St. Croix County, and simultaneous to this was working with Dunn County and Chippewa County. So I'll show you a map here that shows the entire regional system. Improves safety for cyclists, pedestrians, and motorists, increases the number of trips taken by bicycle or walking, and connecting communities and places of interest across and beyond the county. Public process, which Rod touched upon. It's always a challenge in any planning endeavor to reach as many people as possible and to get beyond what I would call the usual suspects, meaning those who self-select because of their own interest. And I guess we could say we tried our best. We had the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee held several meetings which were open to the public and advertised as such. The committee itself included representatives from other departments, so it was kind of an interdisciplinary approach. Highway Department, Health Department, Planning and Development. Project website was established and maintained. Online surveys of preferences for routes were conducted. An online mapping tool called Wikimapping, where people can go on and show their preferred routes on a map, was conducted. Press releases were issued, and 2 open houses were held in relation to the plan. Plan recommendations really boils down to 4 types of improvements. The minimum improvements, which means basically no widening of shoulders itself, but that would be bicycle route, signage, wayfinding, et cetera. That's 178 miles of road. The next, I guess, tier is 4-foot paved shoulders. That's 121 miles. 7-foot paved shoulders, significantly wider, 24 miles. Then off-road trails, 7 miles in total. The plan designates 4 priority corridors, and those are areas that through the analysis and through public input seem to have the highest priority. Those are identified in the plan. As I mentioned, the bikeway improvements are meant to sort of match up with the 5-year capital improvement plan. There's a map in the plan, map 2-9, that shows highlighted in yellow where those improvements would match up to the county's adopted CIP. And then the cost, if you look at the plan, the cost estimates there's kind of 2 estimates given, one as a standalone project and one if it's done in conjunction with a roadway project, which would lower the cost should the county pursue that. So funding options, as mentioned here tonight, basically this plan isn't really marching orders, but it's a tool in our chest to give us an opportunity to leverage funding. These are just a few examples of the grants that are available. Surface Transportation Program. She had actually a speaking role, and I think went over it, but do you want maybe talk about the funding for a moment?
Sure. One of the really important things about having a plan, an adopted plan, is to make you eligible for a number of different funding programs. Most of them, take the Transportation Alternatives Program, for example, you will rank much higher. They don't say that you have to have an adopted plan, but you pretty much do, because you won't rank very high if you're trying to be funded for a project that doesn't appear in an adopted plan. So a number of, this is just a list of a few possibilities for funding. And as Matt mentioned, the costs in the plan we did include as if the improvement was being included as a part of a highway plan, road plan, or project, and then we had a price if it was done separately, which is considerably more expensive in all cases. So a few of the options is Surface Transportation Program, also more recently known as the Surface Transportation Block Group Program. But that is a federal program that's available to all modes of transportation, surface transportation, and can fund up to 80% of your project. Transportation Alternatives Program is another federal program that's funneled through the state, through the state's program. And that program is for, as it says, transportation alternatives. So it can fund bike trails, walking trails, improvement of historic, preservation of historic transportation facilities, and a number of different kinds of things. So that's eligible. It's very competitive, as all of the grant programs are. But we did receive the funding for this to do this planning effort through that program. And they also fund improvements, the capital improvements. The Highway Safety Improvement Program is, or HISIP, is one that would address just areas where there have been a number of accidents or there's some serious safety issue at the site. And that program funds up to 90%. So some of the projects may be eligible for the Highway Safety Improvement Program. The County Road and Bridge Fund can fund shoulders and bike lanes, and they can be considered part of the roadway. They are eligible under that program. And again, as a reminder, the adoption of the plan does not obligate the county to expend funds except as funding and resources allow. So we We understand, I don't just do bicycle and pedestrian planning. I work with the highway, county highway commissioners and the local city and village engineers, and I know very well what the financial situation is with our roadways. But that is the most effective and cost-efficient way to make the improvements, is as a part of a highway plan, highway project. And would hope that you see it clear to make yourselves eligible for other funding.
Thanks, Ann. So the next couple slides, and I knew coming in that they wouldn't probably display tremendously well here tonight, so it's one reason we sent it, and it's also in the plan. This is just the county's plan, just highlighting the proposed bicycle pedestrian network, shown by the type of improvements that would be required here. And then kind of zooming out here is the regional plan. And keep in mind, just for semantics, we would call the county plan a regional plan. That's more of a term used when we would apply for grant monies. They would call the county plan a regional plan, but the actual regional map here is actually showing all the way from the St. Croix River down by Hudson, all the way over to the eastern portion of Eau Claire, from basically the Barron County line down to the Buffalo and Trempealeau County line. So a large geographical area, and one of the things I mentioned earlier was unique about this planning effort was that the RPC acted as the consultant not only for us, but for Dunn, St. Croix, and Chippewa counties as well. So there's a level of integration in this effort that I haven't really seen a whole lot of. So that,
Excuse me, Mr. Michaels. Supervisor Bates, did you wish to comment?
Well, I had a question.
Oh, sorry.
I had a question. In looking at that 80% and the 20% that potentially would have to come from somewhere, can that come from, for instance, the city of Eau Claire, the county of Eau Claire, and perhaps even from some other groups that might be interested in bicycling? Can it be a combination of funding?
Oh, certainly. Yes. The 20% side of the local match. Yeah, the local match can be a combination of different funding sources, foundation funding sources, as long as there is an entity that's sponsoring the project.
Thank you.
Mr. Michaels, do you have more?
No, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions. When we update a road, can we ask for more money just because we're putting in a bike route lane on that road? Does that get us more funding from the DOT for that road surface?
It depends upon what funding source you're using. Some funding sources are kind of capped, so it would be just spreading the money around a little bit thinner. But many of them you would apply for a project, and a project would be funded. So it would be the roadway and the bicycle facilities.
So does that rank as higher because we're doing both a road as well as a bike route?
In some of them, if it were a project that were an STP urban project that within the urbanized area that came to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, of which I'm the director, that would receive more points for involving more modes of transportation.
I have two other questions. Do any of the grants that we could apply for help pay for maintenance of a trail or just for the development of a trail or a route? Do we ever is there a grant out there that we could apply for that would help an existing trail with the maintenance of it?
I wish John were here. I'm not certain. I would suspect any maintenance funds that come through could be used, especially since most of these routes are on road. It's really just a part of the road. You know, there was a very small, we were very, very conservative in putting together the recommendations. We have very little trail in there. That is certainly the most expensive and the most difficult to maintain facility. We only put them where there was absolutely no other option, or where it was appropriate because of the location of a park in an elementary school or something like that. There had to be a pretty strong driving force for us to recommend a trail. So as a part of the road, it would just be maintained as a part of the road.
My last question then, I know that the city started asking developers when they create a subdivision to pay for the road in front of it and the sidewalk. So as I'm wondering if the Eau Claire County Code and the zoning code allows for housing developments in our rural area. So I'm kind of thinking of this Highway 93 as it's going toward Oliva. To ask the developers if they're having a bunch of homes that they're adding with more pedestrian and possible bike, that they would be assessed a fee for connecting that trail.
So currently, right now, as far as public improvements that are within rural subdivisions, really that is an acceptance by the town and the town board. So the developers worked with the town to construct the town, the road to the town road to the town standards, and then they take the road over. As far as the trails, that would be, especially with those specifically along the state highway corridor, we'd have to work in conjunction with the Department of Transportation, depending on where those trails would be located. If it would be located within the boundary of the subdivision, then that would have to be, we'd have to work out some sort of developers agreement. And then there would have to be some sort of homeowners association, because that wouldn't be a facility, if you will, that would be taken over by, let's say the town or the county. That would be really on it'd be part of an outlot, if you will, that would be part of the ownership of that particular development and those that would live in there. So it'd be similar to like our stormwater and facilities that, so if there's 60 lots, there would be 1/60th of a share that would be put aside and that would go on their deed, that there would be for any future maintenance of that stormwater feature, the holding retention basins, if at all were, any attention needed in the future. I don't know, does that help?
Yes, so if, let's just use that Highway 93 corridor and working the trail toward Oliva. Who would then maintain the trail? Who would remove the snow from the trail to allow people to use it and so forth? Would that be the county? Would it be the state? Is it the developers, the homeowners association, so forth?
Again, John Johnson we wanted him here. He's traveling to Madison. He has some meetings tomorrow, but I know members of the Highway Committee may give us some guidance on this as well. But my understanding, it would be similar to, contracting back, the trails would be on the DOT right-of-way, and then if we are responsible for any maintenance of that, then the highway, it's no different than plowing the roadways. But the members of the Highway Committee, maybe you look at that budget. Supervisor Henning is nodding his head. Is that something that would be? Okay.
All right, thank you. That answers my questions.
Supervisor Henning?
Thank you. I'm the last one that doesn't ever want to see a trail. But there are two sides to this. Obviously, people get by without joining groups like yours, and they still get funding. Because otherwise, nobody would have get a grant. So we all recognize that. And right now, we're doing trails alongside our highways, and we're not part of the group. So you can do it without a plan. You can submit a plan to the highway department if you're going to put up a trail, and you can work with John and see what he can do. Maybe there's things that you can't do. But there's, I'm trying to get rid of what was already talked about. Right now, I want everybody to know you can ride a bike on any road you want to. So unless it's designated like a four-way, like the interstate or something. The plans that come to John at the highway have costs associated with those. Engineering, his time, maintenance cost, cost sharing, and even if you don't get the grant, he's spent all this time, and which is money. The county doesn't have any money. We know that. And getting back to the road maintenance, if it's a county road, the county takes care of the road. You put a shoulder on it and for a trail, and that shoulder breaks up, there's nobody to pay for that. So that goes back against the county. And so if we join your plan and you give us a bunch of plans, we're gonna have to raise our budget in order to offset that, because that's a cost that we're not planning for. So I want everybody to know this is not cost-free to join your plan. I'm not running down your plan, I'm just trying to show the other side of it. And how many, you got 4 counties now, you got St. Croix, Dunn, Chippewa, and Eau Claire. How many trails or grants have you gotten for each of these other counties?
For development of the system?
For trails, what we're here for.
Well, they were all done under TAP grants. The plans were all done under TAP grants. And that's up to the counties. I really haven't been involved in developing grant applications for the counties. It's their plan. If you adopt this, it's your plan. It's not, I'm just a consultant.
These were done before?
No, these are new plans. 2 of them are being done right now.
Right, St. Croix County was done
a year ago.
Yeah, I think 2 years ago.
Is that the only one, or?
Well, and done in St. Croix, or done in Chippewa, which are being done simultaneously with this one.
They're working on it, they're applying for it, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and equipment, there's many, outside of Eau Claire County, hardly anybody has any equipment to take care of this. Now, you've also got in your plan off-road trails. Who is going to maintain those off-road trails? Do you have any idea?
If they're under the jurisdiction of the county would maintain them. If they're under the jurisdiction of the city of Altoona, the city of Altoona would maintain them.
So if they're down in Cleghorn, you mean the county would have to do that?
Yeah, I suspect so.
I mean, I think there's recognition, hopefully just in effort to full transparency. If this plan is adopted and implemented, there would be costs associated with the improvements and the ongoing maintenance, just like any other transportation improvement that the county or any municipality or jurisdiction undertakes. So I don't
Then
I would hope we
implying
didn't
then-
obfuscate
Are you
that
implying then
point.
that the county would be responsible for that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I apologize. Could you repeat that?
Are you implying then that the county would be responsible for that?
No, I think it's
off-road trail?
it would depend on the jurisdiction of said trail. Did you have a specific trail you were inquiring
Well, no,
about?
but I'm looking at your map with your off-road trails, and if they're out in the middle of nowhere,
Yeah,
somebody's gonna have to take care of that. You're gonna have to sweep it, you're gonna
You
have to
can help.
get the snow off it, you're gonna have to repair the blacktop. I'm
Yeah.
trying to answer some questions here
Yeah.
for the people.
So as far as the, I just want to, I don't even know what page number it is, but this graph here, this is a graph that would illustrate the 4 different types of areas where the improvements would be made, whether they're going to be some signage that's going to be placed on the roadways, some markings that are going to be placed. One of the last bullet points, or the last bullet point, is that if we connect everything that's in the plan, okay, if it's the desire of then it matches with the capital improvement plan. If we look to connect, off-road trails were suggested in areas where there was really no other means of connectivity, okay? So it'd be basically a last resort effort to make those other roadway connections. By no means is this plan tonight that you're going to be considering making commitment to these areas, or these seven miles in particular. It's just areas that we have identified when we look at the county as a whole and using the county highway system. How do we navigate bike and pedestrians, multimodal type of transportation? Okay, so it is not, it's just suggestions. Maybe at some point in the future, there comes another alternative to those, those off-road trails. But this is not regional planning's plan. I mean, obviously, it was developed in cooperation. We talked about the partnership and collaboration that we went through to have this. This would be a plan that we'd be able to, you as the county board, looking at being fiscally responsible and other means and have an opportunity, you'd be able to utilize this to maybe help some of the projects that are in the process and as you plan for the highway improvements, there might be some opportunities that you might be able to use here. It's saying that we could put this on a shelf and there's no commitment to using it in the future. But if we don't have this on the shelf, I think Andy indicated pretty clearly is that we don't necessarily need it, but the ranking for the grants, we won't rank very high if
That's an unknown, though, that's not
if we
positive.
chose to do that. So
That's not positive, you don't always get them, and so.
you're right. I mean,
But even if you
process.
don't get a grant, what I'm getting at is, if you give a plan to our highway commissioner, he has to go through all of this work for you to get the plan to go forward. And if you don't get the grant, he's still got the expense for the county.
Well, there'd be a process of applying.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I think
Thank you.
Supervisor Henning raises some very, very valid points, but I think it belongs to debate between supervisors, not staff and supervisors.
Yes, I was about to remind supervisors that the purpose of the discussion of a report is informational. And I think that Supervisor Wilkie referred to the fact that we're lapsing into advocacy. So Supervisor Henning, could I request that the rest of your points be saved for the item when it comes up, and then advocate for or against? And, okay?
Yes.
Thank you. The next person I have is Supervisor Stelches. Informational?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
I noticed that the plan tries to take good advantage of county roads and the ones that are hopefully not the busiest. But is there a possibility, or do town roads come into play at all here? And would they, you know, in some instances, I can look at these routes and say, boy, because I've ridden a lot of these, and I would rather be on the town road than on the county road. So does that come into play?
Yes, and believe me, we drove a lot of miles looking at these roads and looked at a lot of data. There are places where the town roads are used if they're direct enough to get people where it is that they might want to be going. And if they're suitable in terms of, they usually have lower traffic than the county roads. But we also don't want a lot of, it's better if you don't have a lot of crossings and driveways and things like that. It's a little bit better for the bicyclist as well. So they kind of weigh against each other, but there are some town roads that are included.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had two questions. On that 178 miles of minimum improvements, does that mean then that the shoulders are already wide enough for bicycling on the majority of the roads here?
Yes, it means either that the shoulders are wide enough or it doesn't even need to have shoulders. If the traffic volumes are low enough and the speeds are low enough, there really isn't a need for it to have shoulders to be safely ridden on by bicycles.
And the other question that I had, you had mentioned the health benefits, the environmental benefits. Do you have anything to support that it increases interest in tourism in the area, that it attracts people to the area?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. You know, just keep in mind when we came in here tonight, our strategy was to be, you know, to not be really advocating too much. That's certainly something that was, I think, a driver of this was what we call, you know, rural tourism. As you probably know, one of the county's efforts is to try to encourage and foster rural agricultural tourism. We saw some examples, like for example in Trempealeau County, where they have some nice bike routes that take people along, you know, some areas that are primarily agricultural, and so we do see that as a benefit. I think it's one of the more you know, it's somewhat challenging to quantify what that would mean exactly, but certainly that's an ancillary benefit that I think would be reasonable to hope to achieve with this.
Thank you.
Supervisor Mortz.
Yes. First, a follow-up question to this previous supervisor. Are you saying 178 miles are already done, so to speak?
Basically, the improvements that we're looking at in that 178 miles of minimal improvements is maybe when there's a resurfacing project going on, there may be some paint that could be applied to put some symbols on the side of the road or on the on the shoulder if there is one.
Nothing real expensive.
Right.
Okay. Then, if we have a policy now that's, I think I read this right, it says incorporate striped safety shoulders. That means, I think, as we're rebuilding, like right in front of where I live, we're rebuilding County K. And so they're making a little bit wider, they're putting a white stripe, and there's about this much on the other side of the white stripe where a bicycle could ride, am I correct? Is that what that's refers to?
Well, ideally, it would be 4 feet.
Right, I understand. I'm just saying, while we're doing it now, that's
Right.
what we're doing.
Yes.
So as we rebuild County K, we're already paying for, we have to pay for this road to be a little bit wider because we're, by policy, putting a stripe there and making it wider anyway. If we would apply for the 4 feet or 7 feet, I'd first like to know if that's on one side of the road or both sides of the road.
It's generally on both sides of the road.
So 4 feet on each side, okay? You would not put it just on one side.
No, usually when somebody wants to go someplace, they want to come back too, so we usually put it on both sides.
Yes, I've been in countries where a lot of countries don't have two-way roads. They have one-way roads and they just move off to the side.
Right.
Save a lot of expense that way, by the way. Just so you know. You could put 5 feet on one side, run a stripe down the middle, and have them ride on both sides on the one side. And it might be significantly less expensive.
Or
I
it
don't know
might-
from
it
a
might be
safety
more.
standpoint if that would be the right thing to do. But you understand what I'm saying? So there may be some options. So if we build then this new road on K that we're building, and we're going to pay for the extra 18 inches already, before we pay for the 18 inches, could we have applied for some money and gotten maybe 80% of a 4-foot roadway, and we're gonna have to pay the 1.5% anyway, maybe paying 20%, we might kind of break even on that. We're going to pay for that much more road anyway. That's my point. And I do have constituents from in my area, and I'm in a rural area, who would like to ride their children more safely. So am I correct that we're actually paying more anyway because we, by policy, are widening it? Thank you. That's what I wanted.
Sometimes the shoulders there is some shoulder, just because it's cheaper, it makes maintenance cheaper because the cars aren't driving on the edge of the road and raveling the edge of the pavement
Right.
all the time, so there
Right,
is.
so that's in part why they're doing that.
Right.
I understand.
Thank you. Supervisor Chilson.
Thanks. I'm debating whether or not to say anything because I don't know if I want you to rule me out of order.
Well, if it's
put part of it under
informational.
informational, but part of it I'd say at this point, I'm just going to wait until we get to the discussion.
Appreciate your clarity.
I don't want the verbal chastisement.
Oh, well. We know how much you fear me. Thank you for your consideration.
Can I say something?
Okay, thank you very much for your report.
If I could add
Oh,
one other thing.
certainly.
John Johnson was on the committee that worked with this, and he has told me that he sees it as a tool. It gives them something to look at when they're designing a road or looking at a road and determine if it makes sense to put something on it. There are some places, like Mr. Henning did mention, that where the wide shoulders were put on a road without an existing plan. The advantage of a plan is that you can build a system, and you know what routes you need, because roads are redone in segments. So if you have a segment here and you put a wide shoulder on it, and then you have a segment on another highway and you put a wide shoulder on it, that isn't necessarily serving the greater need of getting people from between parks and employment centers and things like that.
Thank you for your report. The next report is from our Finance Director, Neil Kirk, Quarter 1 Financials.
Okay. Oh, guess I'm having the same problem with the slides not necessarily showing. What if I just shift them a little bit? Here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm here this evening to provide a brief, high-level update on the Q1 financial activity. By no means a very detailed presentation. It's my intent to come before you each quarter to talk about the quarterly financial activity. So the first quarter is a little bit unique. It's often difficult to draw too many conclusions and assess too many trends on one quarter of data, particularly because we don't have a trended quarterly data to look at historically to be able to look at in the same format as some of the new reports that we're doing. So instead, Q1 is more focused on looking at where are there anomalies, where are there things that occurred in the first quarter that might provide us some potential cause for concern or things we have to be considering when we're looking at what the impact might be for the whole year. As we move through the quarters, you'll see my analysis and my, I guess, assessment, if you will, become more detailed. As we get more data, we get more trending, as well as you'll see as we move through the quarters, we will also start to transition to doing more projections to what the year end would look like. We talked a number of times about the unassigned general fund balance, for example, and you'll see that as we move through the year and through the quarters, we will start to get to a point where we'll start talking about what might that impact to that general unassigned fund balance look like. Okay? So at a really high level note, the Q1 financials were slightly better than what we've seen in the last 2 years. And I'm comparing it really only, again, to kind of the last 2 years for comparative purposes. And again, this is kind of Q1 of 19 versus Q1 of 18 or 17. The Q1 revenues, if you adjust out internal services, and as a reminder, internal services are a little bit of kind of right pocket, left pocket money, if you will. An example is health insurance. We created a health insurance fund. That fund, we take in the expenses, we charge the departments out, which is kind of the revenue to that fund. In theory, that fund's revenue and expenses kind of offset. So unfortunately, that's just the way the accounting works on it, so I've taken that out kind of the equation. So that would say Q1 revenues are about 16.4% of the budget. That's actually about 2% better than what we've been seeing in the Q1 2017 and 2018. So that's kind of the good news, if you will. The Q1 19 expenditures were about 20% of the budget, which is relatively flat to what we saw in 18 and very slightly up from what we saw in 17. As a reminder, kind of revenues historically, and I think we've talked about this structurally, are always lower than expenditures. Typically the grant and aid revenues, which are a significant portion of our revenue, almost 29%, they lag. They lag expenditures, and they can lag, as we've talked before, I think sometimes months, sometimes even into the next year, if you will. Another one that also historically lags is the sales tax collections. And we typically see those 2 months after the month of sale, but in the first quarter, it seems like sometimes the state is a little bit slower in doing those remits of sales tax, and so often we don't see those first quarter sales tax receipts until April, and that's what happened in this particular quarter. Those receipts came in April, which was after our financial cutoff and close, and so if you look at the numbers, you'll see that the sales tax looks like we essentially got nothing in Q1. It's really merely just a timing, and eventually will kind of catch up to itself. The vehicle registration fee is another example, one where we have no history. I have nothing to judge by. How are we doing? What kind of linearity would we have? We did collect $388,000, and that is roughly 16.9% of the budget. So all things being equal, I assume that number will go up. I would assume that there probably will be more registrations that would occur in the summer months and early fall. So nothing there that I would say is a cause for concern. A few more financial notes. Personnel expenditures compared to the budget were pretty comparable to what we've seen in previous years. Total personnel expenditures amounted to a little over $10 million, about 20% of the budget. I'd say that's in line with expectations. We had roughly about 40 or so vacant positions, vacant FTEs at the end of Q1. We've tended to have somewhere around 30 to 40 vacant FTEs at almost any given time, it seems like, at least in the last few quarters. There were a few things also to note. The overtime expenditures compared to budget were high. I don't think necessarily surprised by that. They were at 45.6% of the budget. Obviously, the highway overages because of the snow events. If you exclude the highway from that, overtime is at 25%. Again, I'd say that certainly is in line with expectations. The fact that overtime was really high for the highway department doesn't necessarily give me a pause for concern as well. After talking to the highway commissioner, I believe he has a lot of ability to potentially recoup that before the end of the fiscal year, and so at this point, he's not seeing it as a financial issue yet for him as well. The grant expenditures are historically high in Q1. That's really because The community agencies that we provide payments to, we do those full year payments in the first quarter. We provide that funding to those community agencies in a lump sum. A couple of items that are a particular note that we have talked about and probably will keep in front of this group. The out-of-county inmate housing cost was actually fairly low for Q1. Whether that continues or not, we'll have to see, but it amounted to about $19,000 versus $24,000 in 2018. As a reminder, that that number for 2018 was $174,000 that we spent for out-of-county inmate housing. So it did have a slow start in 18. It's got a little bit slower start in 19. We'll have to see if that continues or not. The last one on the list, and again, we've talked about alternate care. I would say that if there was an element that would maybe be a pause for concern and that we'd have to keep our eye on, and I'm sure we will as we move through the year, the expenditures for alternate care were up in Q1 versus Q1 a year ago. So, just a couple other things I wanted to mention. The next page is I'll call it a little bit of a plug, if you will. These are the quarterly financial reports that are out on Report Central. I think in some respect we've gone maybe from no reports to quite a few reports, if you will. And
Excuse me, Norm, could you move that a little to the right so we can see the left portion? Thank you.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to point this out and provide a little bit of a description for you so that, when you're looking at these reports that you have a little context. A number of these reports are looking at what I'll call the section summaries that are in our budget package. And when we talk about the budget, we talk about different kind of section summaries or program areas, such as general government or judicial or whatever. And so these reports look at what were those budget amounts, were there any adjustments to them, what's the quarterly financials activity that's a quarter, and then we'll start to develop that quarterly history that then we can now compare a year from now what happened in 2019 in the first quarter versus what's happened in 2020 in the first quarter, and we can start to do a little bit more deeper dive and comparative analysis on kind of year to year rather than at the high level that I just mentioned in the previous slides. It's a pretty long list of reports. There are different ways to look at the expenditures and the revenues for the county. As we go through again the quarters, I will probably be picking and choosing certain ones of these that I might want to highlight to kind of draw your attention to as we go. And I guess just as a continued plug, if you will, just how do you get to those reports? If you go to the county webpage again and you go to the government section, the very first top piece on the government section says Report Central. That brings up all the reports that we have out there. County-wide reports are on the top. If you were to click on the first quarter, for instance, you will see a table of contents come up. That's the exact list of reports that I just had in that slide. And you can hyperlink to any one of these. If you click on them, it would go right to that report. Now, obviously, you can't see that report very well. But we've tried to make it as user-friendly as possible so that you can get to these reports. You can print them if you like. They'll all be in PDF format. And every quarter, again, we will put those reports out there. Along with you'll see that one of the reports is a director's report where I do provide a little bit more narrative into what's kind of gone on in the quarter. And that's one of the reports that I review with the Finance and Budget Committee as part of the quarterly review. So,
thank you. Supervisor Leary.
Chair, I was just going through for the first quarter and I noticed the Human Services first quarter isn't linked. When do you expect that information will be available?
On the quarterly? On the, okay.
There's no active link on that for first quarter.
Okay, I thought it was linked. So there's no financial page out there, you're saying?
It's not highlighted, and when
Oh.
I press Q1 under Human Services, I'm not getting anything, so,
I'll have to look at that, I'm not sure.
thank you.
It should be out there. We just actually went through, with our finance user group, we've established a much more aggressive close schedule. So my intent is that these reports will be out there by the end of the month and following the typical quarter end, if you will. So by the end of July, all the reports should be out there for the end of Q2, for instance. Now, the reports that are out there in the quarterly section, if you go by the departments, have two aspects to them. One's a financial report, and then one is a kind of a narrative of activity for the quarter.
Thank you.
Supervisor Russell.
Thanks. I was wondering on the sales tax collections, does that include that new online sales? The internet sales tax?
Well, I guess I would answer it yes, but there's no way for us to know that. We get very limited to almost no detail from the state of Wisconsin when it comes to sales tax. Basically, they just tell us, here's the amount of sales tax we're going to be depositing in your account. Sales tax is self-reported, so it's difficult for even, I think, the State Department of Revenue to be able to tell you how much would be coming from internet sales in particular. Even if they had that, I'm not so sure they'd want to share it, quite honestly. But I'm not so sure that they could even determine that.
Supervisor Gatman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify the $344,000 for registration fees or $388,000, that's just 3 months, January, February, March.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, everything there is just the first quarter.
Excuse me. Supervisor McKinney.
I'd just like to recognize and give thanks for having all of the overheads on our iPads. I found that very helpful tonight, so thank you, everyone who made that happen.
Thank you. Thank you, Norb.
Okay.
The next item on our agenda are the written reports, which you have in your packet. The contingency fund claim report on page 3, and vouchers over $10,000, pages 4 to 5. Any questions on those? The next item on our agenda is the proclamation proclaiming Wednesday, June 19th, 2019 as Juneteenth Day, and I ask the clerk to read the proclamation.
Whereas Juneteenth Day is the oldest known celebration commemorating the Emancipation Proclamation, the document which ended slavery in the United States, and whereas June 19, 1865 is recorded in history as the date when word of the emancipation brought freedom to the last remaining slaves in the country, and whereas this occasion in the United States has grown into a global celebration which encourages self-development and appreciation for all races and cultures, and whereas many area organizations and community members have organized a celebration to heighten awareness of this observance and to provide an opportunity for all people in the community to get together and share in an atmosphere of respect and inclusion. And whereas this celebration marks the 18th annual Juneteenth celebration in the city of Eau Claire and will be held at Carson Park, Pine Pavilion in Eau Claire on Wednesday, June 19, 2019. Now therefore, the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims Wednesday, June 19, 2019 as June 19th in the city of Eau Claire and encourages all residents to join in recognizing this day of unity, freedom, and opportunity, and to honor the diversity of all racial and ethnic groups in our community.
The chair looks for motion to approve the proclamation. Motion by Supervisor Leary, second by Supervisor Boerboom. Any discussion, questions? All those in favor of approving the proclamation, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. The other item in this section is a rezoning request from owner Virginia Anclam Estate, which will be referred to a future meeting. Next item on our agenda, first reading of ordinances by committees. The first is file 19.
Amending section 3.15.030B and C of the code, position and full-time equivalency, FTE establishment.
This is first time reading. This will be referred to the next meeting for second reading. Next is file 12.
To amend section 4.35.165B of the code, land conservation fees, and to repeal and recreate chapter 17.04 of the code.
This is also first reading, and this item, did you have a question, Supervisor Gibson? Sorry.
I do, thanks, Chair. There was an amendment for this. All that amendment is doing is because when they type this ordinance up, they combine two separate paragraphs, and the amendment only read letters and numbers it. Because this is first reading, do we have to have the amendment at our next meeting, or can we correct this and bring it to the board as corrected?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think ordinarily the simplest thing to do would be to take it to second reading and do the amendment when we have the second reading. It's simply a change of numbering or
Right, it's just, it renumbered and relettered the resolution.
I think that's a relatively simple change, and we can take care of that at second reading. Am I correct, Tim? Yeah.
Okay, either way, I was just wondering if it make it simple just to correct it.
Okay, I want to make it simple. Supervisor Pagonis.
I would request that just the section on fees be referred to finance. It's the ordinance requires that finance committee look at fees. And so that piece of it, I think, needs to be referred.
Okay, I think are you making the motion to refer that section to the committee?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
Pursuant to County Code 4.02.050.
Thank you. A second for that, Supervisor Wilkie. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Are there any questions?
This is just for a referral.
Yeah, well, I just want to make sure I'm covering all the bases. Okay. Let's do this with your keypads. So please take your keypads in hand and vote.
Right, I think so too.
Okay. Where's the result? Why don't we have a result?
Supervisor.
Oh, okay. That is passed 24-0. Thank you very much. The next, we have no first reading of ordinances by members. Next item is reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards, and second reading of ordinances. The first item is file number 8.
This ordinance amends section 10 of the county code regarding vehicles and traffic.
This ordinance is before us for second reading. So motion. Motion by Supervisor Chilson, second by Supervisor Henning. Supervisor Coffey.
I would move that the board have the resolution go referred back to administration and judicial committees to be reviewed. Do I need to explain why?
Well, you could simply make the motion.
Okay.
And then there can be a discussion of that. Okay. Supervisor Chilson, were you seconding, or were you? You had your hand up.
I will second, and then I'd like to discuss.
Okay, the ordinary way to handle this would be thank you for your second. The person who made the motion has the privilege to address it first, and then certainly would come to you. Supervisor Coffey, do you want to address your motion?
Yes, please. Lance Basting called me because he is in my district, and so he spoke tonight about the towing and impoundment. I called Ron Kramer and John Johnson about the towing and impoundment procedures after I met with Lance. And John said that there had been no impoundment of county cars at the highway department for quite some time, which is what was spoken as well. Also, I talked to Ron Kramer. He said that cars only linked to criminal activity are stored by the county. All non-criminal situations where cars are towed go directly through private towing companies. And their fees vary from company to company, and towing fees are higher than when the county sheriff is making that towing. So I think there are two issues that I think we need to address, which are not addressed in the new proposal. One is that the towing and impoundment ordinance needs to be clear about current procedures that will be followed for vehicles towed off county property in criminal as well as non-criminal situations. And I also propose that Eau Claire County contract with private towing companies for specific towing and storage fees so that the fees are consistent from one towing company to another for any county towing that is done. And if we contract for this service, which we do in many other services, this would make the fees more consistent.
Supervisor Chilson.
Thank you. My comments tonight in relation to the speaker are quite timely, as a matter of fact, and if you'll indulge me for just a minute, I'd like to share a story that I was involved in related to this specific situation addressed by the speaker earlier tonight. Approximately 10 days ago or so, I received a phone call and an email at my work. It was from a customer, and the young lady happened to have been a student at UW Eau Claire. She had purchased the car from us 2 years earlier, and she had to return home to China on a family trip that was going to turned out it was going to be longer than she anticipated, and wanted to know if I could help her go pick her car up. And I said I absolutely would. She overnighted me the keys from China in an envelope, and then we went to go to her address to pick up her car. When we got there, her car was not there. And on coming back, we called the Eau Claire Police Department and found out that her car had in fact been towed and it was impounded or at a storage facility. The bottom line on it is that she was in China and was unaware of it, and I went over personally to help her and get the car and everything. In the process, from the car being tagged on the 24th of April to me picking it up somewhere on or about the 10th or 14th of May, I don't remember what it was, it already had incurred a bill of towing and storage of $1,025, which that's a significant amount of money. So when the speaker spoke to the situation, it really hit home with me, and I like a lot of his ideas, and I think the county would do well to incorporate something into our code so that the rates are consistent, the rates are potentially bid, that he's spot on his numbers when he said the numbers on the tow. I'm very familiar with the tow costs and the amount of towing that was charged because the car was tagged and towed. The tow on that car was around $260 or $80 broken out, and so what he said tonight is exactly spot on, and the storage was $50 a day. So I agree with Supervisor Coffey. I think it should go back because I think as a county we should have some uniformity for people, and it should have consistency, it should have transparency, and it should have some competitiveness to it. So I wholeheartedly support it, and I hope my story, which is very fresh in the last 2 weeks, has been helpful.
I think we'll take that as a comment in support of the motion. Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add that regarding the referral, it would appear to me that there is some fiscal impact to the taxpayers, if nothing else, and perhaps the Finance and Budget Committee could be somehow included in the loop, because it would appear that I know the Administration Committee will be doing, if they would be doing bids for competitive bid process, it still will have a fiscal impact to the county. So I think somehow we should be included also in that, on the Finance Committee.
I'm not sure how to do that, but I will ask Supervisor Pagonis, do you find merit in that suggestion?
Thank you for your question. I note that there are storage charges, and I know that that the change in the ordinance is an attempt to modify the charges and possibly to just, it doesn't indicate a deletion. So I think that it might be worth a discussion at finance, at least for us to determine whether there is anything that we should be weighing in on. So I can certainly take it up on the agenda, and we can just review it to see if there's anything that is
Might it,
not agreed.
might it work best?
No. But it says the pursuant to this chapter shall be assessed $30 for each day the vehicle remains in storage, and that's no longer a valid number. It's not coming to the Altoona storage. So
May I suggest,
exactly, that's true.
if it's possible, may I suggest that it be referred to administration when administration works on it, then it may refer it, I believe it can refer it to, or we can refer it to budget and finance once there's some,
Right.
revision or number attached to
I
it.
think that's probably a better way to do it.
Okay, let's do it that way. So we'll take the original motion, committee and administration will take it up again based on, if the motion passes. And in its deliberation, it can indicate whether or not to pass that also to budget and finance. Is that acceptable? Okay. Sorry, I have to catch up with myself here. So we have a motion and a second, and I believe we've had all this, I'm sorry, Supervisor Anton.
Picking up on Steve's comment about his situation with the woman in China, should there be, as there are in some situations, an appeal process that says, well, my situation is highly unique, I need consideration. Could that be worked in? And I'm not proposing that we do it, but I think it would be desirable to at least consider it.
I believe the committee administration will take your comment into account.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see, oh, sorry. Still catching up, sorry. I see no other hands raised or lights lit. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on the motion to refer this item to the Committee on Administration. That passes 24-0. Thank you very much. Let's see. The next item on our agenda is file 14.
Requesting resolutions to be considered at the 2019 WCA Annual Business Meeting.
Motion, Supervisor Bates, second Supervisor Neiman. Supervisor Bates, will you comment, please?
Thank you. I will.
Oh, sorry. Would help if I turned your light on. Sorry.
Thank you, I will. Each year, as we go through our resolutions before the WCA Board of Directors meeting, we compile a list of the resolutions that really have a statewide implication if they are indeed taken forward. What you have found in your packet is a list of those resolutions, and the process here will be they will continue on to the resolution committee. They will be compared with what is already in the proposals to support by WCA. And if indeed they are separate from what already exists within that measure, they will be added by the WCA conference. So that's the process. The first part of this is simply that we would vote to have these move on.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning.
My question has to do with as these are going forward and they are then acted upon by the WCA at their September meeting, and if they go forward from there, what happens after that? Do they continue to be active resolutions, or do we have to renew those every year?
I'll ask Supervisor Bates to respond.
Thank you. They will go to the resolution committee, and that's where it's sorted out whether or not there's very similar resolutions already in the WCA agenda. And if there aren't, then they're added. At that point, remember the WCA's primary purpose is lobbying. And so it helps to support the lobbying effort to show county support for specific issues, and it becomes a part of that record.
Does it continue 2, 3, 4, or 5 years later when they haven't acted on it at the state?
It does as long as it meets, as long as the counties within the state of Wisconsin still feel it's an issue that is not addressed.
I guess I'm referring to the alcohol resolution, the tax on alcohol that was submitted 5 years ago. And I'm wondering if that's still being acted upon by the WCA, and if not, how can we remind them that they should be?
Well, your resolution will do that. It will remind them that there's still interest out there.
Do I need to rewrite it?
Every year?
Yes.
No.
So what's reminding them 5 years after it was originally passed?
When you're at the WCA conference, you take time to actually help prioritize where the efforts of lobbying will occur. And I would hope that people that have a passion for particular issues would take time to advocate for them at that time.
Thank you. Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Supervisor Bates. If two counties bring forth resolutions that are basically similar or the same, and it's new, does the resolutions committee then work on combining them or deciding which one is better than the other, or how does that work?
You look for the resolution that has the strongest language and the clearest points. It may turn out that they may be very, very similar, but obviously you're looking for something that's going to have an impact when you bring that forward to your legislators.
Thank you. I see no other lights lit. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file 14. Thank you. That passes 24-0. The next item on our agenda is file 16.
Authorizing carry forward of funds from 2018 budget into 2019 budget.
Motion? Motion, please. Supervisor Pagonis, second Supervisor Boardboom. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So about a year ago, we adopted a policy to permit departments to carry forward unspent funds. So often these might be funds that have been issued by a grant, or funds that might be for a capital project, any of a variety of things. And if the funds are not spent during the calendar year and the project is not complete, then what is left over can be carried into the next year. I think a good way to think about this would be, for example, information services may have started something, didn't get the project completed, still has some funds left, and the project will continue in the following year. So what typically happens, the policy now states that the finance director the departments bring the carry forward request to the finance director brings it to the Committee on Finance and Budget, and Finance and Budget brings it to you. So that's, in a nutshell, what this policy is. So what you can see on page 51 are all of the requests for the year. Many of those requests are donations or grants that are specific to that particular project. Some of the requests are actually capital projects that have not been completed. So this is something that I'm hopeful you'll only see annually, and that it's based on the policy that we've adopted. Part of the reason for the policy is to allow us to have better track of what has continued through the years. In the past, our prior ways of doing it have been somewhat muddled. So that's what you have in front of you. This is just a carryover from 2018 into 2019.
Thank you. I see no requests to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file 16. That passes 24 to nothing. Thank you. File 13.
Authorizing participation in the local government investment pool and designating the local official or officials.
Motion. Supervisor Dunning. Second, Supervisor Wilkie. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is something we participate in regularly. This kind of just had to be re-upped this year. The local government investment pool is something that is developed by state statute, and basically what we have to do is to designate who can transfer funds in and out. That is typically the treasurer, and we now have a new deputy treasurer, Erica Frew, who now would be authorized with this particular resolution. It's explained pretty clearly, I think, in the fact sheet, and it's something that we would normally typically do. It's more housekeeping, I think, than anything.
Thank you. I see no requests to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file 13. That item passes 24 to nothing. Thank you very much. The next item is file number 15.
Authorizing addition of one FTE pretrial screening specialist.
Motion. Supervisor Miller. A second, Supervisor Schaffnagel. Yes? Okay. Yes, okay. Speaking to it, Supervisor Miller? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry.
Either one.
I'm sorry, who was the alternate?
Supervisor Beckfield.
Supervisor Gatlin, are you speaking to this?
I can, yes.
Please do.
I'm unprepared, but I can.
Well, this is in the absence of Supervisor Beckfield.
This position, it's pretty clear in the fact sheet, is a position to act kind of like as a liaison before somebody who needs to go through the system, where they have to go to help them with pre-trial activity, and to be able to monitor if they've been released on bond, so as to not to lose track of them. It's a 4-year grant, if I remember correctly. You could see in the fact sheet there was other counties that were available for the grant. And if we're eligible to reapply after 4 years, pending the performance outcome. And we were presented with starting prorated with a 0.70 FTE versus a 1 FTE. The full costs, everything that would cost for that position is there. And I would ask for your support.
Thank you. Supervisor Stelches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to add on to what Supervisor Gatlin said, the discussion on this position did focus on the fact that it was grant funded, and whether, I guess the age-old question is, if the grant goes away, does the position go away? And I guess the answer to that is, in theory, yes. And I think we are also reassured that we are implementing a better tracking process within the county to map grant-related positions so that as some of those grants may be threatened, we know that the positions come into question as well. The other hope is that if this would allow even to reduce some person's stay in the jail, we could take off some of the pressure for our jail population, where people could be released on various levels of supervision or recognizance. So hope this position may be able to help with that. And so I think the committee felt it was a really good opportunity to try this.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that there's a full-time and .7. If we apply for the full-time position and we get the funding for the first year, and then they reduce our funding, would we, after we've hired the person, given them benefits, would we be able to go back to the .7 FTE with no benefits, or should we start at the .7 FTE just in case we don't get the funding?
Supervisor Gatlin, do you wish to respond to that?
Go ahead, Sue. Help.
Supervisor Miller? Hold on, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was, of course, had originally come to Judiciary and Law and then went on to the Human Resources Committee. The grant application that was supported in both committees actually was for the full-time position, and it will be fully funded, or I should say, if it's fully funded this year, it will be fully funded by DOJ throughout the process. The .7 FTE position was just given as sort of a comparison, what the difference it would be without the benefits and so on and so forth. But both committees fully supported the full-time position based on some of the comments that were already made, in that there's going to be more intense involvement with some of the individuals. This person is going to actually be housed right in the jail and will be able to work with the individuals immediately and try to take some pressure off that. So that's where that's at. I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Just one more question. Okay, so in the last statement, it says any reduction in the amount of appropriated funds would impact the individual within the 4-year cycle. So let's say we get funded the 80,000 plus for the first year, it stays there for the second year, but in the third or fourth year, they start reducing it. Then the county has to pick up the rest of the tab, is that correct?
Well, the DOJ, it is their intent to fund those projects for the entire project period. And that is what we are going on and going forward with. In 3 years, if suddenly they change their mind, I guess we will have to go after them and say this was your intent. I don't know what else to add to that.
Thank you. Supervisor Neiman, followed by Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to the .7 FTE, how many hours worked per week would it require to qualify for the health insurance and the benefits?
Know the answer to that? Go ahead.
It's over 30 hours a week that you'd have to work to qualify.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
That-
It just seems like 1 hour difference. I was just curious about that.
Okay. Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. The fact sheet and the resolution don't agree in tense. In the fact sheet, it says, if we receive this grant, then we're eligible to reapply. So it assumes a future. The resolution says the amount will be covered by a grant through the Department of Justice. My question is, has the grant been awarded, and has Eau Claire County, it says it's an eligible applicant, has it received some amount from this grant?
Supervisor Miller, do you wish to respond to that, or?
No, I can. This came forth at the beginning of this month because the application was due shortly thereafter. And we gave it our blessing to go ahead and submit the grant application, but we have not heard anything on that particular item just yet.
So the hiring then is contingent on the grant being awarded?
Correct.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wilkie.
Well, Supervisor Pagonis got at what I did have some concern about. I would note that I'm not, the fact sheet isn't the resolution. Really, the resolution is the controlling document. I would point out there that unless I'm missing it, somebody pointed out to me that it doesn't show that it's contingent on getting the grant under the be resolved, nor does it speak specifically to the issue of what happens when the funding runs out or tails down so low that we can't afford to keep it going. I was real pleased to hear it said that we are working on tracking these ones better, but historically we used to put a sunset clause on these in the actual resolution so that they didn't get lost in the shuffle or buried someplace. Unless there's a timing issue, it might be wise, and I did have the opportunity to look at this in judicial law, that we might want to think of cleaning that up a little bit in terms of a sunset and potentially making it clear it is subject to the grant, because the resolution doesn't state that. Based on that, I would make a referral back to judicial law.
I believe you would.
Or I correct that. HR, I think, would be the appropriate committee to look at this.
I think you could refer to committee, or you could postpone to the next meeting. Or, I'm sorry.
Motion to amend contingent upon the award of the grant by the Department of Justice.
I think a motion to amend right now might be premature because we do not have the wording.
Thank you, Corp Counsel and Chair. I think that would expedite this, that if we could get an appropriate wording that indicates under the be resolved, this is subject to the awarding of the grant.
I suggest that you would make a motion to postpone to the next meeting, and by that time we would have the wording of an amendment which we could introduce.
I think Corp Counsel might have it right now.
Yeah, I think all you need to do, and from what I understand is that you're trying to make this contingent upon the grant being awarded by the Department of Justice, correct?
Yes.
And I think that you could just make a motion to amend this resolution and add language at the end of the now therefore be resolved. Put a comma there at the end instead of a period, contingent upon award granted by the Department of Justice to cover the full cost of this position.
Thank you, Corp Counsel, for putting together my motion. I so move.
You have made the motion. Is there a second? The second is from Supervisor Leary. So we have a main motion, we have an amendment, and a second to the amendment. Is there any discussion of the amendment?
Can you please reread it?
The amendment would be contingent upon adding the language at the end of the now therefore be resolved.
Yes.
It would be contingent upon the award of a grant by the Department of Justice to cover the full cost of the position.
Supervisor Pagonis?
But it doesn't address the subsequent years. Shouldn't it say continuing through subsequent years? It's right in the fact sheet. Appropriated funds will impact individual programs subsequent years within the 4-year cycle. Should that be part of it?
Well, assuming that they don't cover in subsequent years, then I would assume what would happen is the position would go away.
So it's contingent on the award of the grant.
Right.
That's fine. Thank you.
Is that the wording of the amendment?
Yes.
Supervisor Wilkie?
Yes, thank you, Corp Counsel.
Thank you. And we do have We had a second from Supervisor Leary. Thank you. Supervisor Bates, are you speaking to this amendment?
I'm not speaking at all.
Oh, well, then don't lean on your light. Don't- My apologies. You look very ready to speak. I'm sorry. The light was lit. Okay. I see no other requests to speak. Please take your keypads in hand. You are voting on the amendment. Oh, you were voting, I see. You pushed the wrong button. The amendment passes 24-0. It's unanimous. Thank you. We're back to the main motion now, as amended. Is there any further discussion of the main motion as amended? I see no request to speak. Please take your keypads in hand and vote on the main motion as amended. That vote is 24-0. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is file number 2.
To repeal section 3.10.030 of the code, affirmative action plan adopted by reference.
I see this. Is this marked for second reading today? Okay. Motion. Supervisor Anderson, second Supervisor Bates. Speaking to it again, Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of work goes into making the affirmative action plan, and at a time, there was a time when the HR committee thought that such a plan had to be developed and submitted to a federal or state agency, I'm not sure. I assure you that Eau Claire County practices affirmative action and fair hiring practices, fair recruitment advertising, outreach to all professional agencies when looking for a specific skill in the job. We just don't have to have it in a file in a plan on file. It's very confusing.
Is that what is meant by reference?
I'm sorry?
Is that what is meant by the phrase by reference?
I think so, yes.
Okay. It is in the code.
It is in the code.
Okay.
In the code,
So we're
county
by
code.
reference means we're just accepting what's already in the code. But which we have to re-up every.
You're taking it out.
Taking it out, we're repealing, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Supervisor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question actually for Corporation Counsel. Now, I know that Attorney Keith Ames wrote the fact sheet, page 62, but I find it interesting. It says that required to have, since it is not required to have an affirmative action plan, therefore the county code needs to be repealed. I find that questionable. Maybe it's not required, but does that mean we actually have to repeal this if we don't want to? So that's my question for the Corporation Counsel. That's a really good. Just because they say we don't have to do it, doesn't that mean we still can at least in some form do it? So do we have to repeal it?
Your light's on.
What I understand, from what I spoke to Keith about this before he left, is that this was initially prepared because this was something that was reviewed back in April of 2018 when there were changes to the code. And it should have been handled at that time, but it was inadvertently admitted, and that's what's indicated in the second paragraph there. And then because the question of whether or not we need to have an affirmative action plan or not was likely to come up, I did an addendum to the fact sheet, which is attached also. And I did some research, and I also spoke with Jamie Gower from Human Resources about this. And my fact sheet indicates that we're no longer required to have an affirmative action plan because we do what is called Equal Employment Opportunity Plan Utilization Report. So that's a regular report that goes from
I see.
the county to the federal government, reporting on those things that would otherwise be contained within an affirmative action plan.
Thank you, that
So that's
answers
the
my
reason why
concern.
the recommendation is to repeal the requirement to have an affirmative action plan.
Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you. I guess my next question is, the Office of Civil Rights says the EEOP, that's the utilization report. Does that appear somewhere in our county code stating to people who read our county code that we do this federal reporting?
Tim, do
Thinking about, because when I wrote this, I know I did some research on it because it was a relatively new area to me, and I don't recall if it was in the code or not, but believe that there must be a reference to it because otherwise it wouldn't have gotten to this information and been able to get to Jean and talk to her about it. I can get back to you on that. I don't know offhand though.
Okay, I think I have the same concerns that Supervisor Leary has, that we want to be open and accountable to our constituents, and it's important to make sure that we have it listed if they're going to read something in our code, that it tells them that. So I appreciate you getting back to me. Thank you.
Sure.
Supervisor Stelzis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I recall the discussion at the committee level on this, and I think we did touch upon the same concerns that were just expressed, that while we were not required to have this plan submitted, we wanted to make sure that somewhere in our documentation that we affirmatively stated that, you know, we tried to promote these hiring practices. And maybe some of my colleagues on the committee can refresh my memory. I think that we were told that it is either in an HR policy manual or it appears somewhere else in the code. And I can't remember exactly what the answer was, but that was a pretty important selling point of going along with this. So if Corp Counsel will do that research, that would be very helpful.
County administrator is telling me that it's in the employee policy manual.
In the policy manual, okay. But to Supervisor DeLuca's point, can someone from the public see that?
Yes.
They can. I mean, it's a public document.
Yeah, policy manual is a public document.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you. I see no other requests to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file number 2. That item passes 24-0. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item is file number 9.
Amending the 1982 official zoning district boundary map for the town of Washington.
Motion? Oh, I'm sorry, wait. Yes, this is second reading. Motion? Supervisor Anderson. Second, Supervisor Henning. Speaking to this, Supervisor Gibson?
All right, thank you. This request was to rezone 3 acres from Rural Home District to the C2 General Business District. Now, originally, when this went to the town of Washington, at their meeting, the request was to rezone to C3, which the town of Washington recommended to only allow the rezone to C2. Okay, this came to Planning and Development Committee, and it was also recommended by the Planning and Development Department that this was within the comprehensive plans for both the county and the town of Washington. Now, the Planning and Development Committee, during our hearing, we also recommended and went by what the town of Washington's request was, and we voted to recommend the C2 zoning.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca.
I just wanted to, I know it says to amend to the C2 in the second page of the document, but farther on down, just wanted to verify that that changes the recommendation later on. I believe it's on, let's see, sorry. It's stated C3 farther down in the document, but does that amendment change that C3 then to C2?
Yes, that's what we voted on, was to rezone it to C2, not C3.
Okay. And then my other question, on the document on page 75, it lists all the people who own properties in that area, not in the rezoning area, but across in the other area. And it's all rural homes. So you're changing rural homes here to C2. My question is, there are a lot of properties that are owned by LCCs and other properties, not actual homeowners who live and have their house in those areas. Does that also allow them, set a precedent that allows those people to go ahead on the other side of this C2 zoning to also ask for C2 zoning on the Talmadge Road side?
Without objection, Mr. Michaels, you could use the microphone back there. Mr. Lavelle's microphone.
Here, you.
So the properties that front on Sandstone are planned for commercial uses. The properties that front on Talmadge are planned for residential uses. So as the plan's currently constituted, they would not be able to make that request.
So the properties that butt right up next to it, the 2424, 300, there's two properties that are directly opposite this rezone. They're on Talmadge Road, but they abut to the Sandstone Road. They would not be able, because they're on Talmadge Road, they would not be able to change to that C2 zoning?
That is correct, Supervisor DeLuca.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Esslinger, do you have something to?
I was just going to show Matt the
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think I was following.
Thank you. Supervisor Neiman.
Thank you. I saw that there was a recommendation by Planning and Development for the owners to provide some buffering for the residences. Have the owners agreed to do that?
They have. With zoning though, you can't put conditional uses on it. You know, if this would have been like a conditional use, you can put conditions on it. For rezoning, you can't, but yes, the owners did agree to.
Well, that's good to know that they wanted to do that, so good.
Thank you. I see no other requests to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file 9. Supervisor Henning?
Yes. Confirm your vote.
Oh.
That item passes 23-1. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is file number 111.
Approving a bicycle pedestrian plan for Eau Claire County.
Motion? Ooh. Supervisor Coffey, second Supervisor Schroffnagel. Explanation, I believe first from Planning and Development, and also Highway Committee had action on this also. So I'll ask for Planning and Development to report first.
Okay, thank you,
Or to
Chair.
provide background first.
At Planning Development, well, first off, I want to thank Rod and Matt for giving a very good report tonight.
I'm sorry. shaky finger here. Sorry.
Did you cut me off?
I did temporarily.
Well, first, if you cut me off, I wanted to thank Rod and Matt for giving us a very good presentation tonight so that everybody understands this plan. At this point, well, planning and development, we heard was presented to us and we voted 5-0 in approval of this. Now, for those that have been on the board here for a long, long time, if you think back at how many different plans have came to the county board here for approval. So at this point, this is just a plan, okay? Now, like at Parks and Forest, with land conservation, emergency management, we have plans in place. And as Rod said tonight, if we can't afford certain projects and stuff, that plan just sits on the shelf, just like the rest of them that we have, okay? I understand some of the questions and stuff that we had during the presentation, and yes, cost is a big factor. However, by having this plan in place, if we do have a project that we are looking at, this plan is a great tool to help us with the grant money, which reduces the cost to the county tremendously. Plus, there's other user groups and stuff that would be involved in this at those times too.
Thank you. Supervisor Henning, will you provide the background from your committee?
Yes, I want to correct something. It was said that we put a wide shoulder on just to be nice people. We don't do that. It's very expensive to do that. If it was an extra wide shoulder, it could have been because of the drainage problem or something. We don't just do it to do it. I just wanted that corrected. By doing what we have been doing, we're assuming only costs that we have to have. By joining this group, unless I'm wrong, it says, where did I have it here? As a reminder, adoption of the plan does not obligate the county to accept funds except as funding and sources allow. So it does give an obligation because we are now automatically saying that, yeah, we do accept responsibility for all these trails that you're going to give us, but we're not necessarily going to fund them right away. Now,
excuse me, before you go on, could you report out the action of your committee as background for this?
Oh, it was,
how your committee voted?
It was 3-2, and
thank you.
And yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're going to, by whatever plans that they give us, is going to be an added expense forever. Not just today, because when you put a trail out, you've got maintenance to it, and that maintenance is forever. So it's not just a cost of $20 today or $1,000 today. I just want everybody to understand that every trail that you do, no matter who does it, the consequences are there, that you're gonna have expenses of engineering. We can't even hire an engineer because our rates that we're gonna pay an engineer are $8,000 to $10,000 below the market. So we don't have an engineer anymore, so we're gonna have to be going out for engineering, and that's an added expense as well. So I just want everybody to know that we're asking to assume a lot of expense because maintenance is forever.
So if I may recap, your committee voted 3 against, 2 for?
Against.
3?
3-2 against it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just to be clear. Supervisor Chilson.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide a little Backdrop information, we talked about this at the Highway Committee for approximately probably about 2 hours. Some of the factors that went into the discussion on this, when we look at projects like this, there is talk about there being grant funding, and that is true. However, there is additional costs that the county is looking at, and some of the things that we talked about, the additional cost of engineering, the additional cost for bridges if we replace them, and if we're going to put in a bike trail, that consideration has to be factored in, because if we move forward with it, widening of the bridge is a potential and significant cost. You also have the additional cost of the road construction, the additional cost of right-of-way acquisition, because if we pave an additional 4 or up to 7 feet, there still is additional right-of-way that it potentially is needed. So that was an additional cost that was discussed. The cost of the maintenance, the repairs, and the snow plowing are ongoing once they are installed or put in. The one thing I wanted to correct, because in no time in our discussion was it ever talked about, and John Johnson isn't here to confirm it, but we did have specific discussions about grants to cover maintenance, and John specifically said that the ongoing maintenance or legacy costs would be bore by the county. There is no grants available, as per our discussion, for any type of updated maintenance. The grants are for the installation and the construction thereof, but once they're in, we own them. So I wanted to clarify that. Want to contend a little bit about what Supervisor Gibson said, is that it is a plan that doesn't commit us to anything. It isn't necessarily true. It isn't necessarily true because Eau Claire County, under how we are formed, has a county administrator, and by Wisconsin statute, what that means is the highway committee, the oversight committee, does not have the authority, and that's a statute. It's just how we're constructed. But they do not have the oversight authority to regulate a project like this per se. That authority is deemed the power of the highway commissioner. So to say that it doesn't commit us to anything, it isn't necessarily true, because if that commissioner decided that he was in love with bicycles and he wanted every road to be constructed that way, we would then be obligated to do it. The last point I had to make, and it was part of our discussion, and everybody here, I'm not going to dwell on it, everybody's well aware of our road situation and the financial straits that we're in. The point I wanted to make on that is we voted, and I was adamantly against it for probably 7 years until recently, to add the wheel tax as another form of revenue for us to have another revenue stream to get ourselves out of the hole that we're in. And that was a struggle I had with this, because in one way we put a tax on people, and I fielded many phone calls on it, and people were not, and the overwhelming idea initially was they were not happy about the money. But if once explained to it, the situation, most of the people agreed that it was a necessary step to do. Nonetheless, we put the wheel tax on to increase our funding so that we could repair our roads and get ourselves out of the situation we're in. Implementing this plan is another cost that the county could potentially incur that has no direct revenue stream for part of the costs and all of the maintenance that the county would be responsible on. I just wanted to provide that backdrop information. It was part of the discussion we had in the vote. And just to reaffirm, it was 2 for and 3 against on the approval of the plan.
Okay. Supervisor Stelches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really do appreciate all the comments that people have expressed about costs, but I would like to echo what Supervisor Gibson said, that it's a plan, it may go on the shelf. We do have others like that. The Lake Altoona Master Plan is one. I can think of some other things that we're going to do in Parks and Forests that will be similar to that. But I really view this document more as a vision, not a plan. And I think it's really important that as a county that we have a vision. And in the end, what gets done and what won't get done will be decided by the budget. And it's the responsibility of the people who control the highway budget, whether they're going to do this or not. Looking at the graph, and I also really appreciate the presentation that Rod and Matt did, you know, a lot of it is in pretty good shape. We shouldn't talk about trails, that's almost trivial in the scope of this. So what we're really talking about is, the big deal is to put wider shoulders on 121 miles of road. And, you know, over time, might take decades for that to happen, but I think we could do it, and I think it's really important that we have a vision. I'd like to add one other point that someone mentioned about tourism. I guess it was Mr. Michaels. Both my son and my son-in-law live in Madison, one of whom owns a bike shop. Both of them hold pro-level bicycle racing licenses, and when they want to come for big training, they come to Eau Claire to go ride around here because they really like riding in this area. And so they'll drive from Madison to come here just to do their training. I think there's lots of opportunities for tourism and for people to enjoy our opportunities around here and improving it and making it safer. Having a vision to do that and taking our time as we can afford, I think is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am one of the two who supported this plan in the Highway Committee, and I support it now. I think that it is an excellent example of collaboration with other counties, which we are hearing more and more in these times of budget constraints, that these kinds of things are going to happen, where we're going to have to share services with other municipalities, whether it be counties, towns, or other cities. I think it adheres right in line with some of our initiatives with healthy communities and our clean energy plan. And it is a plan, everything that has been said, there is a strain on the Highway Committee right now, the highway staff. Things will be costly if the plan goes through and the Highway Committee has to redo a road or resurface a road or restructure a road. They're going to have to take into account the plan, the bicycle trails, if it's in our county. And I think I like aligning with the other counties, and I would ask you to support this plan.
Thank you. Supervisor Coffey.
I very much agree. I think that anytime we want to move forward on a project, whether it's slowly or quickly, we need a plan to do that, and it's vital to have this to move forward at all. I think the point that we all need to be moving more, we all need to be doing things other than driving our cars, and I think that we are attracting young people to our community, and we need to keep doing that for employment purposes. And if there aren't things for them to do, we're not going to make that happen. We also spend money on ATV trail signage and things for other modes of transportation. So I think it's important that we diversify that effort in our transportation besides for cars.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning.
It's interesting, when I came to Eau Claire 30 years ago, the big topic of discussion on the front page was whether the city should build a bike path on the Chippewa River just to the south of Water Street. It was a trail that was argued that it would be of no value to anybody, and it would never cease, it would never return its investment. And we see what the city trails have done now, whether it's whatever is happening within the city. And we're already seeing it on the MPO committee when we look at bike trails that are outside, and we're looking at them, what the plans are and what the future is, and the need to put those in there. And I think that the tourism issue is certainly a factor. I've also had friends come from the Twin Cities that come over here to bike our trails in Eau Claire County as well as Dunn County and those areas. So it is a value to the community to have. So that's my.
Thank you. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you.
To be followed by Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our Supervisor Dunning sort of stole my remarks. I was thinking also of about 30 years ago when what was known as the six-pack really and truly decided they weren't going to support anything that really led to this kind of expenditure. And when I look at now the wonderful bridges that come across that bike trail, and it's been done over 30 years. So we're not talking short-term planning here. We're talking long-term planning. And it may not be something that we look at immediately, but obviously if we don't consider it, we would indeed be taking away from the vision of being that attractive place to live, raise a family, quality of life, that we believe our young people, in particular our young professionals, are looking for. So I hope I would urge your support of this, and if it sits on the shelf for a while, in 30 years when I'm not here, I hope my grandchildren will be making the bike trail between here and the cottage. Thank you.
Supervisor Anton.
Thank you. The one person that I guess is left, you probably know how I voted. I voted against it. Not because I thought it was a bad idea. I think it's an excellent idea, but we're faced with a money problem. And my question is, given that money situation that we have, is it possible that we could bring this up for a vote later when our picture with regard to roads is a little bit more clear? I'm in some way representing also the people that elected me, and I got emails and phone calls, and I was compared to everybody, including Hitler, for supporting the wheel tax. So I know that there's an interest in keeping taxes down and trying to get things done. So really, could we proceed with this at another time if we don't approve it now?
In order to do that, a motion to postpone indefinitely would be in order, if you wish to make such a motion.
I'll make such a motion.
We have a motion to postpone this item indefinitely, which means that we can take it up at any other time we choose. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? The motion dies for lack of second. Thank you. Supervisor Schroffnagel.
Thank you, Supervisor Smyer. I agree with Supervisor Stelge's Coffey, Gatlin, and I want to point out an organization that I've been part of that's part of the state of Wisconsin, and that's Couples on Wheels. And they organize conventions based on routes that they can take in the state of Wisconsin to celebrate the different counties. And it's a big deal for that organization, and they bring usually about 100 people into an area to just ride the areas and get to know the countryside and urban side of where they're at on that particular time. I also sort of want to pay homage to a longtime Eau Claire County planning person, Todd Andrews. And he had been a huge advocate for biking and improving access in Eau Claire County. And now with him being gone 6-7 years now, I'm sure he would really appreciate seeing Eau Claire County progress with a plan to really foster bike travel. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Knight.
Yes, I'd like to speak in favor of it. I think it's a step in the right direction to attract and keep creative young people in the community. It's fine having concerts down by the river, but also the outdoor assets of the county are a major part of the quality of life. Any good given weekend, if you go out on the bike trails, you run into a bunch of gophers. Minnesota people love coming over here. For one thing, we have lightly traveled rural roads. We have hills, which they don't necessarily have. I think it helps to plan ahead so that when you do a road project, you can widen the shoulders at that time. I know Dave Landgraf, who is a local hero here, a coach and a cross-country skier, was killed in Hayward a few years back going down by a distracted driver, going down a rural road that had a very narrow shoulder, and he was on the right side of the correct side of the fog line, but there wasn't much space over there, and this gal rear-ended him. So, and as far as the complaints about trails, I only saw like 7 miles of trails, and if it will get a kid to school safely, I think that would be money wisely invested. Regarding the concerns about having staff time spent to land grants for this bike trail, or this plan, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money on bait if you want to catch a big fish. So.
Supervisor Neiman.
Thank you. I just want to agree with Mr. Knight's comments regarding safety. We need the wider lanes. Yeah, you can bike on roads as they are now, but they're not as safe as giving that extra berth on the bike lanes alongside the roads.
Supervisor McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to support having a plan on the shelf, as the language I've heard, in case a time comes along when there are grant applications that will be made, that plan then is in place already. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to speak in favor of this. I attended one of the open public sessions that the group held on this, and I was impressed by the amount of interest in it and the input that avid bicyclists were offering. And most of the people that I've talked to actually are retired people who are interested in bicycling because they have time to bicycle. Yes, so I think there's a lot of cross-generational interest in this as well.
Thank you. Supervisor Henning.
I just want to clear up one thing. If you did not support this, it still wouldn't stop the trails. You could still apply for grants, just like this group will do. It wouldn't stop anything at all.
Thank you. I see no other requests to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file 111. The motion passes 20-4. Thank you very much. The last item on our agenda is appointments. You have the appointments listed on page 79 of your packet. I suggest that we can handle this in one motion. Before Supervisor Bates makes the motion, I want to point out that the chair has made the appointments, and this is a motion to approve the appointments. Motion by Supervisor Bates, second by Supervisor Miller. Any discussion or question? Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on the appointments which you see listed. You put the thing up. Very good, thank you. Supervisor Chilson? Supervisor Anton? Thank you. That is 24-0. Thank you very much. We have reached the end of our agenda. A reminder to you, we have only one meeting in June. I believe it's June the 18th, and Supervisor Bates will be presiding at that meeting. We are adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County.
Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.